Surgery as we know today, that we all practice, study, is hardly 200 years old, from the mid 1800s. It really developed in Germany and around that part of Europe, and we study and we talk and we only remember those names. This instrument in my hand is used today by the orthopedic surgeons to hold the bones while they are operating on the bone. It's called lion-toothed bone holding forceps. There's another forceps like this, more ancient. It's called the Ferguson's lion-toothed bone holding forceps. It holds the bone. Most of these instruments that I see today, I can go back and relate them to Sushrutha. And you know, when did Sushrutha live? When did he describe all these brave new things to the world? Somewhere between 1600 years before Christ to 600 years before Christ. A lot of people agree it's somewhere between 800 to 600 years before Christ. This instrument that I am showing you today, he designed at that time to operate on the bones, on the fractures, and he called it as Singha Mukhi. Singha is lion, Mukhi is the face. There is another instrument I would like to show you. This is called the proctoscope. To look at the rectum, anus, rectum and the upper rectum. This instrument is used today. It's called proctoscope. It has an obturator inside. It goes in, it's lubricated heavily, and it goes through the anus into the rectum, and we can actually look like an endoscope, and while pulling it back, we can watch the hemorrhoids from the three angles of the clock plopping into the orifice. We could operate on them. We could see for any growths in the rectum. This instrument 3000 years ago was actually designed by Sushrutha. He called it Bhagyantra. Bhagyantra then was actually, to my mind, more sophisticated than this. The cover, the sheath, was actually a three-flanged, three-bladed instrument which was light, which could be folded, and without an obturator or with an obturator, very gently inserted inside with a lubricant, and the three windows between the three flanges would allow the three hemorrhoids, the three piles, to pop in, and he could take the cautery, a red hot iron, and actually cauterize. Even today, either using a laser, using a cryo, or using just a cautery, we are dealing with those hemorrhoids in the same way. If I go back to that period when Sushrutha lived, Sushrutha contributed, Sushrutha created this brave new world of surgery. If we Google Sushrutha, almost 630 peer-reviewed articles will come up, and everybody unanimously calls him either the father of surgery or father of plastic surgery. At that time, can you imagine what the world was? America, the entire continent, North and South America, like we understand, did not exist. You know what it was at that time. Europe, the Scandinavian, Nordic, European countries, the Vikings were 800 years after the death of Christ. What was the wilderness at that time in the North Europe? What was happening in today's England at that time, the Scotland? They were just small tribes all the time warring and fighting, era of barbarians. What was happening to the Germanic and Franciscan tribes? So that was an era when in India, on the bank of Ganges in Kashi, lived this man and contributed this, thought of this, and actually performed hundreds of such operations. What are the contributions of Sushrutha? Sushrutha, besides trauma involving general surgery, he described so many things in medicine and in surgery. Sushrutha gave an in-depth account of the treatment of 12 varieties of fracture and 6 types of dislocation. He continues to spellbound even today's orthopedic surgeons of how accurately he made description of different fractures, dislocations, and made it easy for everybody to understand and apply techniques to them. He mentioned the principles of traction, manipulation, apposition, stabilization, and also post-operative physiotherapy. Sushrutha also prescribed measures to induce growth of hairs and also measures to discourage unwanted hairs. He implored surgeons to achieve perfect healing, which is characterized by absence of swelling and absence of any pus and also return to normal color. Sushrutha described 60 types of upakarma for treatment of wound. He described 120 surgical instruments, complete creativity. And he also described 300 surgical procedures, which were all again his ideas and his creations. He classified human surgeries into 8 categories. The 8 categories, the Sanskrit names, if you have to translate it in English, it would go as excision, chedya, scarification, what we call as lekhya, puncturing or vedya, exploration or isya, extraction or aharya, and evacuation, vasrya, and suturing, sivya. He has described various reconstructive procedures for different type of defects. For successful surgery, Sushrutha induced anesthesia using intoxicants like wine and the cannabis indica, and the doses, their correct administration, etc., has been dealt with in Sushrutha Samhita at great details. The treatment of different defects which required plastic surgery, but the 3 among them prominent was Nasasandhana. Nasasandhana is today's rhinoplasty or the nose job. Ostasandhana, that is lobuloplasty, and the Karnasandhana, that is the otoplasty. Even today, rhinoplasty, described by Sushrutha, is referred as the Indian nose job. It is done by using a flap of the skin from the forehead, bringing down to the nose, suturing the reconstructed defect with this new skin, and once the skin takes up, is live, then it is separated off from the origin into the forehead and is taken it up. The skin flaps, the skin grafts of today have origin this way 3000 years ago to Sushrutha, and it has survived throughout this time in a very little modified avatar today. He described 6 varieties of accidental injuries encompassing all parts of body. Plastic surgery and dental surgery were practiced in India even at that time and had actually reached its pinnacle. Students were properly trained on variety of models. Another fascinating aspect about Sushrutha is how he trained a large army of students and his methodology of training. The students had to undergo a 6 years of education before they could actually start the apprenticeship. Before they were inducted, they had to take an oath about their allegiance with the patient and the oath about how they will safeguard the interests of the patient. The Hippocratic oath came much later, and in the Sushrutha Samhita and his other writings, there are in-depth chapters on medical ethics. Today, there is a revived interest on medical ethics, but if one has to read Sushrutha Samhita 3000 years ago, how many pages he has devoted to medical ethics. Those days, surgeries to be taught on dead bodies and surgeries to be taught on models, vegetable models like the pumpkins, the watermelons, and different kind of fruits, what we today call simulators. This whole thing was there 3000 years ago, and the students learned how to cut, how to excise, how to suture on these models. He was the first one in the history of the world to insist that you could not learn surgery unless you dissected human bodies. And human body dissection is as old as Sushrutha. Those days they did not have such perfect instruments like today, so the art of dissection was to allow the body to decompose where it could be dissected more easily, and then ask the students to go through the layer of the flesh and understand each layer and different facets of the anatomy. Fascinating. We all talk about Leonardo da Vinci and his anatomical dissections of dead bodies. We must understand that this was all done and insisted by Sushrutha 3000 years ago. That was the beginning of human cadaveric dissection to learn surgery and human body. Another important contribution was to write this book, Sushrutha. Sushrutha was written on palm leaves in Sanskrit. Sushrutha is exhaustive. It has got 120 chapters divided into 5 subdivisions, and it has chapters on anatomy, physiology, therapeutics, ear, nose, throat, human brain, so on and so forth. It's fascinating that a busy surgeon like him, how he maintained documentation, how he took a keen interest in writing and could create some voluminous treatise like this, which has survived 3000 years and continues to form a great reading even today. Compared to many other scriptures of ancient India in Sanskrit, this book survived the ravages of external aggressions, the ravages of time, so many things, and it's a wonder that this book remained and then got translated into many languages. In 1907 in Kolkata, first English translation happened, and Sushrutha was brought out in English language in 3 khandas. Almost 800 years ago, this book was translated by Arabs in Arabic. The first Arab book was Kitab Shahasun al-Hindi. The second one was Kitab-i-Sushrut, and that again spread Sushrutha's lessons and teachings across the Arab world. Later, the Tibetans took it up and also translated in their own languages. The first European translation of Sushrutha was published by Hessler in Latin. Heller in Germany translated Sushrutha in German language, and that really brought awakening, awareness, information about Sushrutha in the modern Europe. This is our past. We should know about him. If any one of you visit Melbourne, go to the Royal College of Surgeons. As you entered the building of Royal College of Surgeons in Melbourne, in the lounge, in the center point as a center of attraction is the statue of Sushrutha. It's ununderstandable that how we could underestimate or even forget this legacy of ours in medicine. We must remember, we must understand that the father of surgery came from India. We must know our history. We must know our contribution. Surgery, as I told you, in its modern avatar is just hardly 200 years old. But when we understand the contribution of Sushrutha, and then we realize that what were we when the rest of the world in the Western Hemisphere was still reeling under violent barbarism, and what were we doing? So it's important that in all facets of our national life, we must understand where we come from. I studied my medicine in its modern avatar. I was not taught about Sushrutha. I studied history in my school and my college. I was not taught about Sushrutha. I think in science books there should be chapters on such important heritage periods and contributions. There is nothing wrong in creating a national history of Indian medical history, or a national museum of history of Indian medicine, and where we could learn, because like Sushrutha in surgery, in medicine there is another huge edifice, a towering figure from Indian history, and that is Charaka. Like Sushrutha, there is also Charak Samhita, which can be a fascinating read for general medicine people or any doctors from the medical specialties, like Sushrutha is for the surgical specialties. So relevance of Sushrutha today again can be fascinating, because when I spoke to my senior orthopedic surgeons that this forceps of yours is 3000 years old, it It came from India, the Sinhamukhi. When I speak to my general surgeon friends or my proctology friends, that this proctoscope that you use today is 3000 years old. This is Bhagayantra. It was designed by Sushrutha 3000 years old. So relevance of Sushrutha is why we Indians should not forget about our heritage. We Indians should not forget where we come from, what are we. And the history is an important thing that every country should remember, because those who forget the history are condemned to repeat it, condemned to reinvent wheels.